Today on Inside Utah Politics, talking Turkey on tariffs. Yes, we are. We sit down with the World Trade Center Utah to understand what they could mean for our economy here. Mitt Romney bids the U.S. Senate farewell. Hear his message to Washington as he prepares for an apparent political retirement. And meeting the new department in town, we sit down with Representative Blake Moore after Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk paid a visit to the Capitol.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us, everyone. I'm Brien McElhatten. Let's go inside Utah politics. And we begin digging into one of the biggest promises of President-elect Donald Trump's campaign, tariffs. Since winning, he's doubled down on plans to institute sweeping tariffs on America's largest trading partners to fight illegal immigration and drug flow.
I'm going to immediately impose a 25% tariff on everything they send in to the United States of America.
And so far, he's announced plans to impose tariffs of 25% on Mexico, Canada, and China, with an additional 10% imposed on China, too. It's left a lot of Americans trying to understand what exactly tariffs are and how they'll affect the economy. And here to help us with that is Troy Keller. He's the World Trade Center Utah's International Trade and Policy Advisor. Troy, welcome to Inside Utah Politics.
Brian, thank you. Great to be here.
Glad to have you here. So for those who aren't familiar, bring us up to speed with World Trade Center Utah and how you fit into the picture there.
You bet. Yeah. So World Trade Center Utah is this really amazing organization that I hope people know about. But if not, especially if you're a business, whether you're small or large, this is an organization that has a mandate from the state, really, but also has a lot of support from the business community to help Utah businesses succeed internationally. So they do things like trade missions. They do a lot of advising, a lot of convening. So if there's an issue that's popped up, they'll bring companies together, ones in town that they think are really focused or impacted by that issue. And so there's just a lot of knowledge sharing, but a lot of services as well. They have a lot of experts there. In my role there, I'm an attorney in town. I work at a firm in town, but I also am lucky to have this part-time role with World Trade Center Utah, where I provide advice on trade and commercial policy matters.
So I'm thinking of a Chamber of Commerce represents businesses in a city or a town or maybe a state, and you represent businesses but on an international scale, right?
100%, yeah. And so great point, because a lot of those businesses are from outside the state and want to come to Utah. That's part of it, but the primary focus is helping Utah businesses be international and succeed internationally.
So we're hearing a lot right now from President-elect Donald Trump and others in his circle about tariffs. That issue comes up every now and again, and now we're hearing about it. So what exactly is a tariff? How do we define that? Great.
Yes, and President Trump loves that. He loves that term and that concept. So a tariff technically it's a tax, but it's a tax on goods when they arrive into a country. And virtually every country in the world utilizes them to some extent. And so when goods are shipped in, there's some sort of tax, usually on a percentage of the value of the goods. And what happens is, I think there's a little of a misconception. Oftentimes people assume that the company that's from outside the U.S. that's selling the product into the U.S. is the one that pays the tariff. In fact, it's the U.S. company that's bringing it in, and so the tax gets paid by U.S. persons, but it also serves as a disincentive. The tariffs do many things. One, they're a great source of revenue, but they can also serve strategic purposes. If there's an industry in the U.S. that maybe needs a little bit of help, you can put a tariff to help them compete globally.
Maybe
more
steel
fairly.
Or something like that.
Exactly, yeah. 100%. Yes. And then sometimes they're used for geopolitics, national security interests to help sponsor manufacturing in the U.S. or to punish a country that that isn't playing ball, so to speak.
So what we know about the tariffs right now, President-elect Trump wants to impose a 25% tariff on Canada, Mexico, China, and I think an additional 10% on top of that in China as well, so 35% on China. What does that do ultimately to consumers here in the United States after we buy products from those countries?
Yeah.
Are we paying more?
Absolutely. I mean, there's just no way around it because, as you just pointed out, the costs become higher for the company. Take a retailer, take a Target, for example. They bring those products in, they're paying 25% more for whatever they bring in from outside the U.S. They can eat maybe some of that, but a lot of that just has to be passed on to the consumer.
How do we anticipate tariffs affecting specifically Utah businesses? I know we have a very diversified economy here. It's not going to hit everyone the same way, right?
That's exactly right. So there's been a lot of focus on the fact that some industries will be hit particularly hard. Think about the construction industry. Super important in Utah because we're trying to increase the number of homes and sort of space that we have here to live in. And if tariffs on a lot of the materials that come from overseas, those will increase the cost of construction. But at the same time, some of the border policies in terms of like workforce, that'll put a bit of a stressor on construction. So they're getting hit kind of almost as a double whammy. But retailers are being hit. Very few things are 100% made here in the U.S. Like think about your iPhone.
Right.
It's take Apple. It's a U.S. company. It's a U.S. designed. A lot of the stuff is made here. A lot of the parts come from other countries. There's a component that comes from Switzerland in the iPhone. There are Utah companies like Huntsman Corporation, a chemical company. A significant amount of what's in an iPhone, it's particularly like the casing that protects it, the chemical coatings that protect the circuitry. That's all coming from chemical companies.
There's so many parts to products that we buy. The iPhone's a great example. Thousands of little pieces and parts that come from all corners of the globe, right? Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. So when tariffs are implemented, and like I said, they've always existed, but when they're increased, it does create some uncertainty. How's it going to play out? Because it's hard to predict. Sometimes it's easy to predict. Sometimes it's hard to predict because it goes through so many steps around the world before a product gets here.
So have you talked to Utah businesses about this issue, and how are they preparing for this?
Yeah. So we have World Trade Centers convened multiple times. As recently as yesterday, we had business leaders come together and talk about what they're seeing, what they're most worried about, and one topic that's come up a few times is Utah businesses tend to be. We see a company along the freeway on I-15. We see their big building. We assume they're a big business. They are a big business, but compared to multinational companies around the world, our economy is made up of what we call SMEs, small to medium-sized businesses, and we have no Fortune 500 companies headquartered in Utah, which in a lot of ways is a great thing because it makes our economy not dependent on a single employer. We have a very vibrant and resilient economy, and that's in large part because of that. But on the flip side, when an economic shock like this happens, or as it could well happen, tariffs a significant sort of challenge for them. They don't have the capital resources at hand to build a new manufacturing plant in a different part of the world, and so they're a little bit more vulnerable to changes like this. However, as a community, one great thing about Utah is the business industry is great about coming together and talking through things and working with elected officials. We have some great ones in D.C. right now. There are representatives there who are in positions like Blake Moore on Ways and Means, which has oversight over tariffs. We have, just have a great representative out there that can give us a lot of help and support.
So these businesses may have to make some changes in the way they do things. Are you confident they can weather a storm, a tariff storm, if that comes?
It depends. I will say the ones that you described earlier, the increase in the China tariffs, I think we'll weather that just fine. It's still not ideal, but we've over years, companies have been moving supply chains to the extent they can out of China. I think that one's a little easier to handle. If the 25% tariff really does happen on our neighbors, Canada and Mexico, that would be really, really challenging. We have companies that export significant amounts to Mexico. If we blow up, that tariff would basically blow up our trade relationships with them. We'd have, kind of retaliatory tariffs coming in. So those, I think, would be difficult to navigate around for a lot of companies.
You mentioned the construction industry. Are there other industries in Utah that stand out to you as particularly vulnerable to, say, the tariffs imposed on Mexican goods or Canadian goods?
Yeah. We don't have any. Well, I'm not aware of any major auto manufacturers here in the state, but we have a significant and healthy aerospace industry. and a lot of those parts and pieces go back and forth over the border. So I think our carbon fiber, we have a lot of expertise in Utah on the carbon fiber side, and those materials, again, get imported. The raw materials come in as imports, and a lot of that through Mexico and through our Texas ports. I think that could be a challenge for them. Our consumer products industry we have a lot of companies that sell consumer products around the country and around the world. And if you're a consumer products company, you can really only grow after everyone knows your name in the U.S. outside the U.S. And so the tariffs that we implement typically lead to retaliatory tariffs, and that has been a real challenge already. And so I think a doubling up of that would be a challenge. But you asked what are things people can do. World Trade Center has a great initiative called a free trade zone that has always existed in Utah, but hasn't really been used because it's a bit challenging administratively to get for a company to make use of it. World Trade Center is revamping it, put a lot of time and resource into making it easy to use. So if businesses are worried about tariffs, that is a way that it doesn't fix it entirely, but it's a way to have significant savings if you make use of that free trade zone opportunity.
Okay, Troy Keller with World Trade Center Utah, an excellent person to talk to, a resource for businesses all across the state. Thanks so much for your time.
Brian, thank you. Thanks for all that you do.
Hey, hope to have you back again soon. We'll talk again.
Okay. Thanks.
Still ahead here on Inside Utah Politics, unrest in South Korea hits home in Utah. How a sudden declaration and then evaporation of martial law overseas resonated here in the Beehive State. Utah Senator Mitt Romney has bid the Senate farewell, capping out his first and his only term there. Now, Romney has served as a Utah senator since 2019 after sweeping 62% of the vote in the 2018 elections. Now, Romney made it clear that he wasn't running for another term, and in a press conference last year, he said it's time for guys like me to get out of the way. And now he's thanking everyone he served with in Congress and the Utahns who voted for him, too.
We accomplished together what we could have never done alone. So I will leave this chamber with a sense of achievement, but in truth, I will also leave with the recognition that I did not achieve everything I'd hoped. What sets Utah apart is not just its beauty and vibrant economy, it is the admirable character of its people.
Representative John Curtis won the race to take over Romney's seat as Utah's junior senator. Governor Cox took some time to thank Romney for his service. On Twitter, he said this. As he gave his final speech on the Senate floor, I'm reflecting on Senator Romney's long career of service to our country and the state of Utah. Over and over again, Mitt has shown us what leadership, courage, and patriotism look like. We turn now to the chaos this past week in America's close ally, South Korea. Their democratically elected president, Yoon Suk-yeol, declared martial law to try to put a stop to what he claimed were political adversaries trying to overthrow his government. Protesters stormed the streets there in incredible scenes. One woman grabbed an officer's gun. Military helicopters circled the Parliament building for a time. Martial law was lifted just hours later after the Parliament voted to reverse the order. The U.S., surprised by the move, calls the move a grave concern.
Our hope is, and every hope and expectation is, that any political disputes will be resolved peacefully and in accordance with the rule of law.
Now, keep in mind, America has almost 30,000 troops in South Korea, positioned to deter North Korea. The road ahead for South Korea remains uncertain, with possible protests, labor strikes, and impeachment proceedings against the president looming. Well, here at ABC4, we like to highlight the connections Utah has to world events. So we spoke to Matt Holtman, a city council member in Cottonwood Heights. He's Korean American, and he was working the phone that day as he watched the crisis unfold.
The number one thing as people were reaching out to one another was just to make sure that everyone was okay.
Matt Holton is on the Cottonwood Heights City Council. His mother is from South Korea. His father was stationed there for some time. He tells us that when they initially got news about the martial law, he was impressed to see the entire community coming together.
Utah has an incredible, thriving Korean community, and being able to highlight that and come together as a common people to celebrate everyone's connection, be it an LDS mission, military service, or having family members that are from Korea as immigrants, is a pretty powerful thing.
We also spoke with Jonathan Friedman, the president and CEO of the World Trade Center of Utah. He explains the Beehive State has strong economic ties to South Korea. In September, Utah Governor Spencer Cox met with South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, the one who called for martial law and is now under pressure to resign. That meeting involved 47 Utah businesses and organizations aimed at deepening economic and cultural ties between Utah and Korea.
We have a very strong presence in South Korea. We've been in touch with our own team members that are in South Korea. We have an office that we opened while we were there on the trade mission. We opened an office in Seoul in partnership with the governor's, so World Trade Center Utah in partnership with the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity and the University of Utah, which has had a 10-year presence in South Korea. And so in speaking to our team on the ground, they're telling us that they do not feel at all threatened or in harm's way. They feel safe.
Friedman's advice to investors: don't panic.
My advice to investors is just to take a big breath and, be patient as world events unfold.
South Korea is one of America's biggest allies and trade partners.
This is the 10th largest economy in the world. They are an important partner. They're one of the largest foreign direct investors in the United States.
Of course, we'll continue to follow the latest developments for you as that news continues to develop in South Korea. Coming up, Utah is getting in on the new Department to Be. Representative Blake Moore talks about how he plans to help DOGE hit the ground running.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Welcome back to Inside Utah Politics. Utah Representative Blake Moore seems pretty excited about the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. Here he is in that post on social media with Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Speaker Mike Johnson during their visit to the Capitol. The duo was tapped by President-elect Donald Trump to head up the yet-to-be-formed department aimed at cutting down on wasteful government spending. Though it's not an official government department, it is an advisory group that will make recommendations straight to President Trump. And joining us now, Representative Blake Moore, the co-chair of the newly formed DOGE caucus in Congress, lawmakers who support the idea of DOGE. Mr. Moore, welcome to the program. Glad you're here.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So talk to me about your new role on the DOGE caucus and why you jumped on the DOGE bandwagon here. What are you looking forward to?
Right. It's since it was actually introduced, it caught my attention, more so than a lot of other things, because the whole concept behind this is to create a catalyst. I've been back in Congress for 2 terms, 4 years, and what there isn't enough of is actual catalysts to make some change. And this seems like that moment that you could actually look back to several decades of, government existence, growth in our government bureaucratic agencies, and this could be an opportunity to find a way to make these more efficient, cut some areas, change up the way that the bureaucracy works, eliminate regulation. And I was really impressed today as we met with Elon and Vivek. Like, they are taking this a very humble, strong approach. They really want to take input, and that was really encouraging today.
Well, how do you envision DOGE working? Because as we said at the beginning, it's not an official government department. You're on the House Ways and Means Committee. That's the purse strings of Congress. Is there overlap here? How do these two groups work together?
Yeah, and that's why Speaker Johnson had, he and I connected on this, and he thought that, with my background, not only on the committees that I'm on, budget and Ways and Means, that is the nexus of where a lot of this reform needs to take place. But I had previously worked in management consulting, a Utah-based firm, a Cicero Group. I've worked in a government agency before as well, previously in my career. So there's a lot of things that almost triangulated me to get pretty heavily involved with this. And that's the part that kind of makes me excited. How it works, I think the thing that I learned the most today from talking to them was they want to do this because this is what the public is saying they want to see happen. We cannot have tax dollars wasted. Tax dollars need to be used wisely. And for too long, decades that go on forever back here, it just creates more bloated government. And this is that unique opportunity. Trump's serious. President Trump is serious about it. These guys are like, look, we're going to do this for 18 months. So they've set a timeline on where they want to see this timeline play out. And members of Congress have been wanting to do this for, as long as you've been here, right? I've wanted to do it for 4 years. There's some in my conference that have wanted to do it for 25. So this is a unique opportunity, and it feels like there's a lot of excitement.
So $2 trillion is the figure I've seen talking about how do we cut $2 trillion worth of wasteful or inefficient spending. That's such a huge figure. Where do you begin to look at cutting that kind of money?
So the reason why $2 trillion has been sort of articulated is simply because that's what our deficit, our annual deficit, is approaching. And so any business person who wants to be able to go and tackle that, because they would never be able to run their business that way. That's just not something that's possible. So that's why that number gets put out there. If you were to go and immediately try to cut $2 trillion, I mean, you would have to be dealing with a big portion of the budget. We did not get here overnight. So the topic of cutting $2 trillion is not necessarily leading the forefront of this. They want to find wasteful government spending, wasteful operations, things that just aren't working or that can be done in the private sector and move things around a little bit. That's the priority. It's not a specific number. Everybody recognizes that this $2 trillion number didn't come overnight, and we need to be able to take the reins back on this growing administrative state, and then that's where the focus is. It's not on a specific number.
I just got home from an honor flight. I followed Utah veterans to D.C. as they looked at the memorials there, and they were talking about their concerns about possible cuts to veterans' health benefits, VA, even things like Social Security. Are those things that you'll be looking at too? And how might that affect our veterans here at home?
So the most important thing is here, the Social Security benefits and Medicare and veterans benefits. There's been a promise made with these benefits. These are going to be honored. And that's a bipartisan commitment back here. So any talk of that is either maybe coming from a position of angst, which I understand, or a disingenuous narrative that they want, that wants to become more of a partisan play. Where Republicans and Democrats all understand that there's been commitments made on all these programs. Now, we take in $5 trillion of revenue on an annual basis, and we spend $7 trillion. So we have to recognize there is an enormous amount of growth in our federal government expenditures. We've got to be able to rein that type of stuff in. If we do programs that are more sensitive like that, they're going to be done responsibly. That is not going to be, so the issue with Social Security, like that's what I have to make sure that I'm very clear with. This is not, we're going to just go and cut all this, cut. We need to find more efficient government so we can actually use our tax dollars more wisely and making sure to support the people that have been, that have paid into the system and committed. So all of that is just simply focused on, doing this better going forward and using this as a catalyst to say right now is that moment that we can take a look back over the last 20, 30, 40 years and say, hey, this is a better way forward.
I see the seal of the U.S. Air Force behind you on the wall there, and I want to ask you about some comments Elon Musk made a short time ago about the F-35. He called it wasteful, and the F-35, of course, is the crown jewel of Hill Air Force Base, a major employer here in Utah. Are you concerned about how cuts to that program, or even just Elon's comments in general about the F-35 could impact people here in Utah?
No, I'm not concerned about it right now. It's okay to have dialogue about what our defense needs are going to be for the future, right? The F-35 program is a very strong, very innovative, powerful strike force that is going to continue on. I think more so than anything, people have concerns about, audits that go on or programs that become more expensive than they were expecting to. Like we even in the defense community, we have to be willing to say, all right, where could there be, wasteful, inefficient programs going on? Like that's all a good thing. We want people, and we want the President of the United States, we want advisors to him, and we want Congress to constantly be working through those issues. I'm a strong supporter of the program set at Hill Air Force Base, and it's going to have a strong future. But we still, as a broader defense community, we have to be thinking about what's the most efficient and best path forward. He's going to talk about autonomous opportunities. That has to be a part of the makeup going forward. but we're in a clear position. We're deploying our F-35s to all the hotspots across the world right now. That is creating world stability right now. And so we're going to continue on with that.
Okay, Congressman Blake Moore, co-chair of the DOGE Committee in Congress. I look forward to hearing from you again, sir. Thanks for your time. Well, that does it for today's Inside Utah Politics. Don't forget, if you have any local political stories you'd like to see, make sure to reach out to us. You can email InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com. You can also follow along with me on social media on X, Brien Reports, or on Instagram. You can search for Brien McElhatten. And you can find ABC4 on social media, too, to follow along wherever you happen to be. And while you're at it, download the ABC4 News app. We are always on. Thanks so much for being with us, everybody. We will see you right back here next week.